Rugby Coach Weekly Podcasts presents Coaching Laid Bare with Lisa Bird Burgess and LJ Lewis.
Hello and welcome to the Coaching Laid Bare pod. This week, LJ and I are delighted to welcome one of my heroines in the game. She's been around ever since I've been starting to play rugby and achieved so much in the game and is still achieving. And we're delighted to welcome Carol Ishwood to the pod. Carol, how you doing? How's it going there in sunny Leeds?
Fine, thank you. Lovely to be here with you and LJ today. So yeah, looking forward to having a chat.
We're just delighted, and LJ, I can see LJ grinning from cheek to cheek there. LJ, morning,
hey,
LJ. How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you guys? You okay?
All good.
All good, thank you.
I just want to tell you guys just a little bit about Carol Ishwood. Carol Ishwood, OBE, just what an amazing woman she really is. And I had the pleasure of knowing Ish way back in the 1980s when she first set up a team at Leeds University, and we're going to explore all that. But just to give you a little flavour of what she's done, really, she captained the Great Britain women's team in the inaugural game versus France. I've many happy memories of that day. The founder member of the Women's Rugby Football Union. Captain of England in their first international game against Wales, of which I know well because we played against her there.
Against you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Many happies of that Pontypool Park day. Love that. She's had a variety of coaching roles from youth, women's premiership, regional, divisional and England, emerging in the national squad. First woman to achieve the RFU Level 3 Coaching Award. Performance Director of the RFUW. Awarded an OBE for services to women's rugby. World Rugby Personality of the Year in 2008. Hall of Fame, one of the first 6 women to be inducted into the Rugby Hall of Fame. RFU board member, RFU Women's Integration board member, the Women's Sports Trust Award for outstanding contribution to women's sport in 2018. And is currently the consultant to World Rugby for the Women in High Performance Coaching Programme, of which myself and LJ are part of. And we're, just honestly, the work Isha's done, and like I say, continues to do, a huge, massive inspiration, an incredibly modest woman, and certainly one of my heroines, like I said. So Ish, I know you'll absolutely be cringing and hating everything I'm saying here, but thank you.
I'm so glad it's not on camera.
Actually, I haven't told you that, no. Yeah. But honestly, what you've achieved is just phenomenal, and I know you don't often give interviews, so LJ and I are delighted with this scoop to actually get time to talk to you and find out about all your wonderful stories and what you're doing for the game. So thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Elge, how are we doing? I bet you can't wait to get chatting in there.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited about today. Not only do I have the pleasure of working with you, Bird, all the time, today I've got 2 legends of the game to, grill and hear fantastic stories from. So, yeah, no, very excited, and also really looking forward to talking a little bit about kind of where Carol wants to see the coaching going and stuff like that. Especially because myself and Bird, we know what we've been experiencing has been really great. So yeah, there's lots to get through, Bird. Hey,
absolutely. Let's get on with it then. So Ish, take us back to 1981 when you first set up a women's team at Leeds University. What was it like to be a women's rugby player back then, and how hard was it set up and get people to take women's rugby seriously?
Yeah, thank you, Bird, and thanks for that introduction. Yeah, look, it's really interesting when I look back to 1981 and think about the game. Then there wasn't, I was desperate to play rugby when I was a kid and wasn't allowed to. Wanted to play football, rugby, cricket with the boys, and you weren't allowed to. So one year I went hot picking one summer when I was at the university and met somebody from Sheffield University, Christine Kenrick, who ended up helping set up the Sale women's team. And she played rugby, so I was like, oh, blimey, this sounds great. I went down, played a game for Sheffield. Would you believe I got shoved in the second row? Did
they give you platform shoes?
No, but I sort of managed. And anyway, so when I got back to Leeds, I thought, right, that's it. I'm setting up a team. And I had some mates I played a bit of five-a-side football with, a couple I was doing judo with, and I put a notice on the men's, the rugby union notice board in the student union, and it was amazing. I got loads of people signing up, loads of women signing up, but also two of the rugby lads put a note on going, we'll help coach you if you like. And honestly, those two guys were brilliant and ended up coaching us for a long time, and for all the right reasons, can I say, as well. So in a way, it was easy, because people were interested and wanted to have a go. So we'd go and train at lunchtime out on the Hyde Park, and then we were trying to find out who had teams, and somebody in our team knew somebody at York University, which was the York coach, which was Simon Crabb, who ended up coaching. We set up a game against them and had our first ever game against York, and then against Hull University, and then we came to the Loughborough tournament. So that was our first sort of season, if you like, just to even be able to get out there and play. And we had some good athletic people. So actually we were pretty good from the start, although, we were the shortest team around for a long time, I think. After starting in various, I did start in the front row, and then they moved me further back because my hands, they said my hands were too good and I needed to get out and be involved in the game more. But yeah, that was when the two lads, Ian and Mark, were just brilliant in terms of supporting us and helping us set the game up at Leeds and get our fixtures and develop the game there.
Because there wasn't any real structure then in terms of, it was a case of ringing up around who's playing, can we have a friendly against you? I mean, things like insurance, travel, there wasn't any of that, was there? It was just like, what kind of kit did you wear? Things like that, just so people can get a flavour.
Yeah, I think we just, Ian sorted out borrowing the men's kit, which was probably still wet and stinky from the day before. I can't even really remember that. We have to buy some rugby boots. So we all went off buying rugby boots and stuff. And we'd borrow the Union minibus or whatever. That's what I remember. And off we go. And you would talk to the women at York, and actually a lot of the York women were the ones that, with some of the Leeds women and UCL, ended up setting up Finchley and then Richmond. So that's where that started.
So the kind of, it was in university rugby before the actual clubs were set up, or were
absolutely the only club side was Magor Maidens
in Wales,
in Welsh Wales, and so they were ahead of the game because it was actually in a rugby club. It was, and I guess the one thing we all thought was, we've got to hang on to this for as long as we can in terms of playing at the university, because once we left, we won't be able to play. But what we all did was say, well, actually, we're not prepared to give up. So that's when we started knocking on people's doors and saying, actually, we'd like to set up a women's team here. We've got 5 or 6 of us, and we'll do some fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what happened. As the women left university, wanted to carry on, they started to hound men's rugby clubs and become part of their rugby club and set up women's sections.
So, you must have had an incredible group of women there that went on. Can you just give us a little flex? So you actually went to London, didn't you, after you'd been at university?
Yeah, so right? There's a few years there in between. So set up the team at Leeds, and then I think it would have been that second season then that UCL came up and played a game and stayed overnight. Carnage in the pub. The guys had to leave because we were doing songs that stopped the shows. So they were like, oh no, we haven't to listen to any more Oliver. I'm out of here. So we had a fantastic night with them. That's when I met people like Debs Griffin, Kate Hindle,
wow,
Sheila Welsh, Barry Welsh. And so when we were looking at it, thinking about the game, and this is where you got news that, Loughborough have a tournament, you need to go to that, and that's what we'd done the year before. We looked at setting up a governing body, and that's what we decided we had to do. So that's where it started to be discussed around, well, how do we get a better structure? How maybe we do need to look at insurance. How do we have a competitive structure? And so for me, one of the drivers was don't just want to play friendlies, we want some sort of tournament, so we know who the best team is. So we were already starting to get there with that sort of thinking around the game. And that's when a small group of us from a number of different sides, and a few of us who'd been on a rugby tour with ostensibly UCL, but ended up with about six universities being represented. When we decided to look at having that first meeting, we just wrote to whoever we knew was playing and said, right, we're going to have a talk about how we take this forward. And that's when we had that first ever meeting in the Bloomsbury Theatre complex in Euston.
Wow! So can you tell us about that meeting? Tell us about that meeting. So how many people attended it, and what was the outcome?
I can't remember how many attended, but we had a
come on, Ish. Yes, you can.
One or two from each. I'm going to have to go back through the archive. So we started early 1983. We would have done it because we, at the end of that year, once we got all the paperwork together, that's when we actually established the union. So I think me and my mate Risby had been on tour with UCL along with some of the Loughborough girls, the Kiel, the Warwick team, and that's where we got hold of them and said, right, we're having a meeting. It was probably June, I think, and sent out to whoever we knew was playing, and we sat and started talking about what we needed to do and what was important to the game. And she, the Welsh who worked for the Sports Council, said, well, we need to set up a governing body. And we'd written to the men's unions, and either hadn't got a reply or had a reply that said, oh, get on with it, yourselves were not really interested. And so we did. And that's where people like, I think, Anne McMahon helped with the writing up contracts. And
oh, yeah, Anne McMahon,
yeah. Sheila Welsh, obviously worked for the Sports Council, so got us a template of what we needed to do, and we spent some time doing that, and then established the actual sort of organisation and that first sort of board committee at the end of the year. And I missed the meeting, and I remember I rang up the next day. I was at the bottom of the street with some 2p coins in the phone box because I was still up at Leeds, and they'd had the meeting in London and I couldn't make it. So I was ringing up going, right, I said I'd do a job, what have you got me down to do? And they said, well, everything's set up. The meeting went really well and you're the new secretary. And I went, oh, gosh, I'm not very good at shorthand or anything like that. They went, no, you're the secretary, which is like the chairperson. And I was like, oh, no. So I think the sort of moral of that story is don't ever miss a meeting. You get given the top job in absentia. So yes, so that was the start of the WRFU at the time, because obviously we were for the whole of UK.
And that's what I was just going to say. That's just an incredible story. I mean, there's so many stories out there in women's rugby that historically that just haven't been told and are not out there. Yeah. That first meeting, that just must have been amazing. And so the WRFU, that's right, yeah, that was in. So all because there wasn't Wales, England, Ireland, there was none of those other home nations. For all our listeners out there, this was the very first board of rugby in Britain, and of which you were chair and secretary, and you had the top job, having not been at the meeting. So get yourselves those meeting girls. So that's just incredible. And you did touch on, and you mentioned that you'd written to some of the unions, and I know for the first World Cup there's some great stories out there as well about how women's rugby just wasn't acknowledged by the men's unions, and it was like so women had to go and create their own unions for it to become recognised and successful. So when did the RFU come on board, and kind of, obviously we had this split because Wales formed their separate union as well. There was a Great Britain side as well in between all this. So tell us a little bit.
So I guess the thing to remember is, although officially and governance-wise we weren't part of the RFUs as such, there was a whole load of people who did help us. So we can't forget that in terms of not the top level, but throughout the game in terms of people like Don Rutherford and Alan Black and some of the guys who work for and David Shaw. And there'll be the same in Wales as well, who on the ground would support. And actually, where did we get our referees from? We got them from the local societies. Which pitches did we use? We worked with the clubs, and we we were part of a club, let's say, but we were separate in terms of the governance was a bit of a mess if you think about it, really. And even within back up to IRB, there was always issues around, well, actually, who actually governs the women's game here? It's not part of the men's structure. And that's when I'm saying here, I'm told, UK, GB. So there was that. And I guess there was something around finding our own way in a lot of ways made us stronger. So by the time we did integrate, which I think was around 2012, we'd had those conversations on and off for years. It was never quite the right time. And we were doing, in a lot of ways, quite, especially later on, we were doing quite well on our own with our own funding from Sport England, from Lottery, etc. And so for me, if I'm speaking now about what became the RFUW and then the RFU, that suited us, and it suited the guys for a little while. And also they were going through the whole issue of professionalism and having to deal with that. So in some ways we had a really good sort of collaborative relationships in a lot of ways that was helping grow our game, and we were getting significant funding and support from other bodies that maybe we wouldn't have got if we were part of the RFU. So for us, when we did join, it was the right time and from a real position of strength. And you've probably seen some other unions whereby, it wasn't done necessarily in the same way, where when they did sort of integrate, amalgamate, or get taken over, I'm not sure that they had the same sort of, I guess, control, power, influence that allowed the women's game to grow and flourish for a while. I think it took a while for some unions to really get to grips with growing the women's game and seeing the potential in it.
Yeah. Sorry, Elge, I can see.
Yeah, I remember that well, actually, Carol, because I was working at the time for the RFUW, because you'd had that funding for the club coach coordinators. This is a long time ago.
Yes.
And I remember the integration, actually, and it was quite an like you say, it was more that actually the timing worked well for both sides, because up until that point, you were quite, the RFUW was doing really well, but then when you guys joined up together again, it was really exciting. And so, for someone like myself who was so young at the time, I say young then.
All right, Alice, don't rub it in.
But I thought it was just amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I saw a little bit of it going on. Obviously, I only knew what I knew from the outside, really. It was a really exciting time, and I honestly now reflect on it and think how privileged I was to even hear little bits of the kind of integration going on. So it was a really exciting time for the game, definitely, from my point of view anyway. So,
Yes, absolutely. And I think that was that, and then I guess what's happened is that the key thing is then that the organization really takes it on and does integrate everything. So the women's plans just automatically get consumed within the plans for the game. But it needs to be managed, and a lot of integration, I've seen it across a lot of different sports. There's a case for segregated bits within an organization for a while if you need the women to stand alone in order to be seen and have their own committees and structures. But we went for the complete integration across all functions, and for me that is the longer term thing. But in order to do that, you need some advocates, you need people within the system in those positions to really understand the needs of the women's game, and also for it to be there as part of their targets, their KPIs, their understanding of how to do it, because it's not always the same, and there's different things you need to do in order to have equality. So that's it. It's shifting that culture to really understand that that it becomes part of rugby, and it's some of the things you can do together, some of the things have to be slightly separate, but there's a load of economies of scale to be had, that it's not just another doubling up of work. especially at the lower end of the game, or the participation level. And then you split when you need to split in terms of performance, talent ID, but there's still a lot of synergy across that you can work on. So I think that's, and to see the potential, this is the growth area. This was the growth area for rugby for the last 10, 15 years, in terms of thinking about numbers of people playing, and certainly across football and rugby, the men's game and the participation there just dropping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I take you back a little bit before we keep going forward, because we've moved off on a bit of a track, but I wanted to ask you really to see if you've got any funny stories or great memories around the time. So you were captain of GB when they played France, which Bird was also involved with you in, and then you were captain of England when you played Wales, when you played against Bird. And I just wondered if you had any great memories of those, those particular moments in the women's game, and any funny stories on Bird as well would be great.
Oh, great! Keep them clean now, Ish.
I've got a few. I guess for me, the GB game was amazing. I mean, I just remember the committee meeting that we had when we were talking about, probably in 1985, we were talking about, should we have our first international? Should we not? We hear the French have played, the Dutch and Italy are playing. Or should we do it? Is it too soon for the game? And I think, in the end, we, sort of half an hour later, we went, no, let's do it. Let's just do it. Let's get on with it, because it'll drive the growth of the game. And so we spent half an hour making a decision. Then spent the next lot of the meeting deciding what the jersey would look like. So the reason it looks like what it did is because I'm rugby league background, so it looks like a rugby league shirt, that first GB shirt. So we spent, and then also you've got to remember that not only were we playing, I was so, when were we, 86? So I was still secretary. So as well as trying to trial for the team, we were setting up the trials and getting sort of selectors and coaches. And this is where I'm talking about, the men's game helping support, where the coaches, we got nominated a couple of really great coaches, and Stefan Cherpak, who sadly is no longer with us, was our coach. And I can't remember his name, Bird, I don't know whether you do, but this big hulking prop from Cornwall called Bob.
Bob. Yes, I know him as Bob.
Who helped train us as well. So we were setting up the trials, and then we were organising the French coming over. So on the night before and we all had to go to London because we were playing at Richmond before the men's county championship final, I think. So we were playing at 12 o'clock. So on, I think the night before the game, the night before the game, we trained at Roslyn Park, and we were outside training. Then suddenly a guy came out from the clubhouse and went, "Anybody call Carol Isherwood out here?" And so I went inside, and I don't really remember, Bird, but Fiona Barnett had been asked to go and meet the French.
Yes.
And off she'd gone to Heathrow to meet the French. So I'm picking up the phone call, and it's Fiona, obviously with another bunch of 2Ps, going, "Carol, I'm here at Heathrow. The French are at Gatwick." So we were like, oh no. I went, oh, just get a cab and get across. And remember, we're all paying for this. Nobody, we didn't really have the money. We had a little bit of money for, we had UCL Union, who Debs Griffin's partner, husband, worked at. So we managed to get us a good rate at the halls of residence where they were going to stay. And so she headed off to Gatwick. And when she met the French, they went, where's your coach? Where's the coach for us? We thought, we can't afford a coach. We didn't know we had to do that. We didn't know we had to get a coach or anything. So she just said, "Oh, sorry, the coach was at Heathrow. It's had to go." So she had to buy like 30 tube tickets to get them into London. And then and so that was, you're all trying to do the things and but we didn't know the protocols. We didn't know how it was supposed to work. The French had only confirmed probably a week or two before. So we were just desperately managing that. But in actual fact, it was a brilliant game. It was a great showcase for our first ever game. And we lost narrowly, which was an excellent performance. So there were some great stories. I think she saw them off as well, Fiona, and she was waving waving them off at the train station whilst they got the tube off to Gatwick, and then put her hands in her pocket and pull them out and realised she had all their tube tickets in her hand. So anyway, so we've got more professional since then, and it wasn't Fiona's fault. But anyway, so that, and then I think Pontypool, obviously, we decided it would, we had enough players and enough teams to have an England-Wales game. So we set that up and held that down in Wales. And again, we stayed at Chepstow Youth Hostel for 2 years running. So I had to order the backs to wash up, and in the evening the forwards to wash up the next day. They tell stories about having to clean the toilets, but I never made them do that. So I think
that was GB. We had to do that for GB.
We probably did. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
But what's incredible about that? Sorry, Al, to come in here, but just what's incredible is you were a player. You were up for selection. You were organising all that stuff as well. Barn is Fiona Barnett, one of my great friends. She was doing all that meeting and greeting. You had to rely on what the great women that we had there to do that. And like you said, the support as well from those guys. We couldn't have done it. We couldn't have posed it. Richmond Rugby Club as well. It was just phenomenal days. And without you guys and without that founding, women's rugby wouldn't have started. So there's just some incredible stories there. Sorry, I was going to see you.
And I think a lot of there was so many people involved in organising that. So friends and players and other people are involved, just making it happen. And that was it for me. Is if you want to play, you make it happen. If you want something, you better do something about it, because nobody's going to give it to you on a plate. And actual fact, you value it more if you're putting stuff into it as well.
Do you not think that that's kind of the beauty of rugby, and we're trying to keep that even now? Like you say, it's a little bit more professional now, but however, even in our league, our girls still have to do stuff because actually it's your club, it's your team. And I think that's a real key value of rugby. Even if it is professional, it's okay to, like you say, have to wash up maybe, Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. It's just I
think it's about responsibilities. It's about being part of something, and you've got some responsibilities to the game and to what you're doing now and what's being done for you, but also what comes next. And I think that's really recognisable in the women we're involved with, and in particular with the women's coaches, obviously with the high performance coaches work that I'm doing at the minute. If you look at any of the aspirations that they've got, they don't all say, I want to be the head coach of here and here. They'd say, I want to develop the game. I want to get more coaches involved. I want to give back. And that's just phenomenal. And I think that's what we want from our women, but from the guys also. I think it really helps if you're having to contribute in order to not be rewarded, but get something out of it as well. I think it helps you really value everything.
And that goes back to rugby's values as well, doesn't it? About respect and family and integrity, and it's what the game is, and those values are great. And no more is it reflected than in the women's game, especially at this during this development phase. And now it's great. But I know, Alge, you got another coach.
I've got another side question. I'm just interested, really. So you had an England versus Wales game. When did you get the other nations? So when did Scotland and Ireland? Was it just having to wait for them to build their player base up and stuff like that?
Well, it was quite interesting because when we talk about the WRFU and the RFUW, the Scottish went off on their own a bit earlier than when we dissolved the WRFU. So I think they'd done it in 93. I really can't remember when the first England-Scotland game was, but I think it was at Blackheath.
I think you're right. Ish, yeah, it was.
But I can't remember the year. It might have been sort of just before they went off on their own or just after. But you'll have to look in the history books for that. And also remembering that. So then we dissolved the WRFU because it was the right time, and Wales was strong enough, and you've got enough people, and also enough people to run the organisation. So we did that, and I guess people have to remember that obviously the WRFU ran the first Women's Rugby World Cup in '91, and Deb, Sue, Mary, and Alice were the people on that event organising committee. I was busy then dealing again with the England team, because by then I tried to leave the committee and step down as secretary, and they immediately appointed me as a sort of coaching and development officer or technical director. So straight back in, but doing something really specific around that sort of technical side of the game, which was probably my strength in a way. So, you know, the 1991 World Cup was us doing that, and down in Cardiff again with a lot of support from different people within the men's game, but also the city council, etc. And then when the next one should have been held in Holland, and there was a few problems with that, with IRB at the time and Holland, and at the last minute the Scottish women stepped in and ran a fantastic World Cup in 1994. So again, you want something to happen, you make it happen, and they did it in 6 months. So you know, and again, another step up in terms of quality and performance. So yeah.
Just going back to that time period where you mentioned about moving into that kind of technical director role, that was a voluntary role. At the time, were you were having to work as well? Like, what did you do, and how did you manage that time? Because obviously, like you've just explained, you're having to do it all. You know, these amazing women, you're having to do it all yourselves. Well, how did you manage that?
Well, for the first 3.5 years, for the first 2 years, I made pizzas and burgers in a Leeds takeaway joint. So I
didn't know that, Ish.
Only pizzas in the student district. Yeah, so I when I finished university, I had a year out because I was going to join the police, but then my eyesight was bad, and you know, I wasn't probably quite tall enough, and they'd started paying more, so I couldn't get in. So I had a year out, then did a teaching degree, and then I decided I didn't want to go into formal education. I really wanted to do sort of community education through community and sport. But I couldn't get a job in that initially. And in actual fact, I've been working in a takeaway and in pubs during my year out and during when I was doing my teaching certificate stuff. So I just stayed on as the manager of this pizza place in Leeds, and made pizzas whilst I helped set up the women's helped set up and develop the women's union. And then after that, when I moved down to London, I couldn't get the job in community sport I wanted. So Deb's husband Chris, who worked at UCL Uni, got me a job in the student cafeteria. So I was making food for 100, 200 students at lunchtime, whilst again, you know, playing and doing women's rugby. But eventually I got the job I really wanted, which was the first part of what was known as the Action Sport Schemes. And so I am in history books around that, and got a job with Westminster City Council on one of their estates. And then when that scheme sort of was stopped, the Westminster City Council took on a small sports development team, and I became head of that sports development team. So we started off with 4 members of staff doing community sport, and by the time I left, I was up to about 35 members of staff. We had an old youth centre that we'd redone through lottery funding, which was still there, Mobley Sports and Education Centre, and we ran the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, and we did loads of sports events. So I spent 10 years with Westminster City Council doing what brilliant outreach work with the people you should be working with to try and get more people involved in sport. So that was, as I say, so that was a real sort of allowed me to work flexibly to be able to then be involved in rugby and the sort of crossovers between sports development, writing sports plans, etc. In terms of rugby as well as Westminster City Council, we're all sort of doing the same sort of transferable skills. So that's probably a long-winded way around say from pizzas to Westminster to you know, getting more people involved in sport. So for me, that's a massive passion.
And during that period as well, I presume that's when you also did your level 3. You were the first female to do the level 3.
Yes, I was
during that period.
Still at Westminster. Yes. So,
can you remember what that was like? Can you remember how being one of the first females to do it, what it was like on that course?
Yeah, it was great. So I think there was 98 of us nationally. So they split it into 2 courses. God, where was it? Egham College or somewhere like that. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. What they did was they ran a first introductory weekend, and then they decided whereabouts people were in the system and their evolution to be able to move it forward. So the course was great because we got put into a small group, and I was with 4 guys, and I didn't really get any sort of negativity from anybody, but I guess there will have been some people on that course, some of the guys who didn't think you should be there, but nothing that was ever came out. And also the people who ran it did a great job with it. But I remember the 4 guys at the end of the weekend said, well, we've been really lucky because we've had a completely different perspective because we've had Carol with us. So that's one thing. Obviously, it sticks in my mind. And also one of the guys on the course who was running our group, one of the tutors, sat me down on the Saturday night and plied me with drink. And because he wanted to talk to me, because he said, I'm used to working with guys, and I can tell straight away about, how they work and what they can do. He said, but I'm not sure about you. And the next day I said, are you sure about me after those 6 pints the night before? So yes, it was good. And then from that, with the 2 different courses, I was one of the ones fast tracked to move through and get straight away to be seen on the practical side of the course. So yeah.
Is there anything you would say to any women out there that want to, start getting their coaching badges, but maybe they're a little bit apprehensive, like you've just said, about being the only woman in a group? Like, is there anything you could say to encourage them to go do it?
I think there's 2 things around that. One is to have the confidence and not to be afraid, because what I've found generally is that the women are a bit apprehensive about it, but they always know more than they think they know, and don't think there's some sort of secret to it. You don't go on a course and get given a magic, sentence of how it all works. But I also think that it's, the way courses are run is down to the tutors and the educators. So I think it's really important that in order to get over that barrier that women may feel about being confident around it, is to ensure that there's other women on that course and there's female coach educators, so they're not the only one in the room who looks different. I think it's a 2-way process, but for women, I guess I was playing, and I was playing at a high level. I was confident about coaching because I'd done quite a lot with Westminster and that leadership stuff. So I just didn't think about it. I thought, I'm just going doing this because I want to learn more. So I think that's the thing, is just brave it and walk through the door, and there'll be people that will be on side.
Yeah. I definitely think that attitude of having, actually, I know more than I think I know, so they're going to learn something as well. Like, definitely that's a good way of approaching it, and that gives you a bit of confidence as well then.
Yes. It's not a 1-way process, it's always a 2-way process, education. Like, in terms of whether you're the educator or the coach on the program, you're both learning from that relationship.
I think it's great as well that that story you told about the guy wanting to sit down and chat to you as well, to get that different perspective. What a forward-thinking guy. And and my experience as well of being involved on coaching courses, when I was the only female like you, is exactly that. You've got to be brave and just get out there. And actually, lots of females know, lots of males as well. I think females, just automatically just think, oh God, maybe I don't know as much. But actually, once you get chatting, once you get talking and that conversation happens, you realise, actually, I do know what I'm on about. And, that only comes from braving it to doing it. And Ish, you've certainly led the way in doing that. I just want to explore a little bit. There's so much to chat to you about in terms of the coaching. I know we're going to come on to that in a minute, in terms of what you're involved with at the moment and what you've set up with World Rugby for high performance coaching. But take us back to like the period of time when you were a performance director for the RFUW. Kind of what changes or what did you implement there? And what were you kind of most proud of achieving in that role when you were performance director?
Yeah, I guess we were fortunate that we could, once lottery funding got opened up for revenue projects as well as capital projects, which are around buildings, so we could use it for people and programs. We were able to apply for that, and I was in a position to, having written all the other plans we'd ever had for RFUW, WRFU, and getting some of that funding from them for the different elements we wanted to do, going in and then being able to professionalize with a large P what had always been a professional operation. I think with England, I think it had already been a good setup, and the players for me were always professional with a small P. So I think that was a great base to build upon. What it did allow us to do, and again, we only initially got 6 months of funding. So I left my job at Westminster, applied for the rugby, for the performance director job, and it was always only ever going to be on an interim basis. So we got a certain amount of money, and we're able to very quickly make a difference, considering the World Cup was coming up in 5 months.
The first Women's World Cup.
No, this was 98.
Oh, 98, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
So I started just at the end of 97, beginning of 98. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And what I did initially was I went to talk to, and this was a really good learning for me, is I took the time to go and talk to a few key people, and ask them about what they'd done. So, oh gosh, Jeff Cook, was it Jeff Cook? I'm just forgetting names now. But the person who'd been in charge of England in 1987, who then went to National Coaching Foundation. If I've got his name wrong, I feel terrible. But anyway, I went to talk to him about what he'd done, and he sort of said, you have a vision, and then you grow that with a small number of close people, and you get them to amplify the vision, and you sell it to people, and you take it forward. And some of the other people I went to speak to were people like Stuart Lancaster, who was working at Leeds, who was always open to just chat about what they were doing. And Stuart was always a brilliant supporter of the game, and was the first to open up when we wanted to put women in with their academies to just train strength and conditioning, then do sort of schools of rugby stuff. It was always well open to it. So so I talked to him, and then the other person I went to see was fitness guy. God, honestly, what is wrong with me and my remembrances of people's names? Come back to me in a minute. But anyway, through the guy who was doing the fitness for the England squad, he mentioned that that Rex Hazeldine was just retiring, and then he might be interested in a part-time role. So managed to persuade him to come on board, which for me, I was like, oh my goodness, it's Rex Hazeldine.
The amazing Rex Hazeldine.
The amazing Rex. So, we had some great people involved. And the other person was, somebody put me on to Kirsten, who was an ex-Olympic rower, Canadian, and she came in as our sports psych person. So right from the start, we had some great people. We had some coaches, Eric and Steve had been involved for a while with the squad as the coaches. So we were able to put quite a number of things into place to then have a pretty good performance at the World Cup, but nobody was going to be on the same level as New Zealand, who came out of nowhere. Well, we sort of knew what we were going to face with the year before when we'd gone to New Zealand and got whipped by them. But to at least start to know we could compete with them for the first 30 minutes of the game in the semi-finals, but after that we needed to be fitter and better at everything we did. So I think that was the start of that. And then from then on, everything I did and what I'm most proud of is probably developing a culture of performance standards, and developing that with the team, with everybody who worked within it. For me, workforce development is one of the most crucial things. So having the culture and having the workforce really buying in and involved and owning what you're doing, And I guess I wouldn't have even called it culture development then. I didn't know as much about it as I do now. But for me, taking that group of people with me to really develop the game and develop our systems and structures. So looking all the way from talent ID to talent development, to the structure of the squads, to the support services, to the training and competition programs, so that everything we did that we reviewed regularly. So it's always continuous improvement, and always, is it going to be enough to beat the best? So is it going to be good enough to beat New Zealand? Okay, we've just won that game. Would it beat New Zealand? And will it beat New Zealand in where they're going to be in 2 years' time? Yeah. So for me, there was always that stuff. And one of the best stories for me, talking about what we did and the plans we had and how we drove that development. We had to go back to Sport England, UK Sport, for the lottery funding after the sort of 6 months were up. And so I had to write the review and the new 4-year plan as to what we would do and how we would do it. And remember, we'd come third. So, as far as they was concerned, that wasn't really good enough. So how we were going to rectify that. And one of the best quotes I had, and which I used on the review report, so I had a picture of the England squad, and across the front I had the quote from Paula George, from what they'd all fed back, and it said, the lottery funding is crucial. If we don't get it going forward, then the future will just be a battle for silver medals. And I didn't really need the rest of the report. It just told the story. So here's the detail, but that's the pitch. It was absolutely brilliant. I couldn't not use it. So for me, I've learned a lesson about always trying to sell information in a real bite-sized way, with pictures, with quotes, with a few stats, as well as the detail of that you've got to have in behind the story.
Did you while you were like developing this and looking at pathways and talent ID, did you look to the men's game and think, because obviously they had just gone through that transition of amateur to professional, and did you look at them and think, actually we need to take this from them and do the same, or actually we need to go off on a different tangent?
Mostly, I think I wanted to use the structures but that they had within the men's game, but only if they were appropriate.
Yeah.
And for me, they weren't always.
No.
So there were a lot of things that we did differently. I looked at a lot of different sports. I looked at different countries. And if you're remembering as well, this is when all of our sports were getting lottery funding. So they were all looking at how to do things differently and better, and talking to other performance directors. And particularly somebody like Chris Spice, who came in as performance director for the guys, who'd been involved in Australian hockey and in GB hockey. When he came into the RFU, he was a great person to chat to and to think about how to do things differently. So I think we always try to do things in the way that suited the women's game, but try not to reinvent the wheel, and to use the structures that were there for us, that would help us meet our targets and, grow the game, grow the standards, grow the workforce.
Do you, sorry, I've got another question on that. Do you think, or maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, do you think like having the base of the game, the pathway, is that the route to keeping the top end, getting us away from that second place? Like, do you think that's kind of the key, or?
You can't do anything without the base. They're both, interdependent. The top end helps drive growth and helps drive standards, and the grassroots is the thing that holds it all up. I think there's for me, it's a bit of a misnomer when people say if you've got a big participation base, then you're going to have great performance. You don't. You can have a really flat pyramid. What you want is a really, a strong base, but have the tall pyramid, by making sure that at every level you've got the appropriate competition, training, workforce, especially coaches, support services that help at every level, that make that pyramid a tall pyramid. So your top end is world class. And I think so it's not always about growing the base. In order to be a better performer, you've got to have the really good systems, structures, processes in place that help drive that elite performance.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Bear,
no, that's fine. And I think, no, it's a great question. And I think it's also being really clear, like you said initially, taking it back to what your vision is and getting your team to support that vision and go forward. You know, the structures are crucial to every organisation, every governing body of sport, but it's like having that right team to drive that forward. You know, and I think we can learn so much, and you know, we've been very lucky to talk to lots of different women on this pod, and lots of them, you know, say about the benefit and value. You've just touched on it then about other sports and what those other sports can bring in. You know, and I don't know what your findings on that. I mean, you know, are there because I know you worked in the FA as well, but just touching on what Chris did in hockey. Was it Chris you said? Chris Spears?
Chris,
yeah.
Chris
I mean,
Spice.
yeah, there's so much we can learn from other sports. You know, I was listening to something that on baseball the other day and about the way they use their psychologist, and it was just a revelation for me. And I was thinking, wow, you know. But I mean, have you got any stories about that, Ish? Just before we, you know, we go on the last couple of questions. But
I'm not sure I've got any stories. Let me think. I think the thing for me is, or
learnings, I should say, not stories.
You can learn lots from all over the place, whether it be business and or other sports, other countries. And I think you've got to keep an open mind, and you've got to maybe also be proactive about learning, and not. I think this is where you fail. As soon as you sit still and think, yeah, we've reached the top, that's when you're in trouble. And for me, that's the best coaches as well. The best coaches are the ones that can always learn something from somebody. So for instance, the other day, one of my favorite coaches, one of the best coaches I've ever seen, Brian Ashton, was on a call with me because he's mentoring Amy on the internship program. And honestly, I had him, I had Robbo, I had a guy called Richard from New Zealand. And we were supposed to be on for 40 minutes. Honestly, an hour and a half later, we're still talking about it. And Brian was going, yes, but Carol, but the more, you know, I'm getting loads out of this. And you're like, that's why he's a brilliant coach.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, is you know, what he did in terms of attack with England when he was with Clive was just phenomenal. He's still doing it, and he's still asking questions, and he's still trying to learn. So for me, it's about that as a leader and as a coach or wherever position you're in. How can you learn? And again, continuous improvement. How can you get better? What's working well? What's not working? What would be even better if? How can we make it even better? So for me, and I remember one of my staff at Westminster saw me interviewed for rugby once, and I think the interview was, well, why do you play flanker? And I think I said something like, well, it's the best position on the pitch because you've never done enough and you could always do more, and I can crawl off, and I think I could have done more. And he looked at me and he went, you're just like that. And I thought, oh no, I must be awful.
We just lost you then. The sound went down.
Did you? So I was just saying about, you know, being a flanker and thinking that you've never done enough and always wanting to do more. And the guy, one of the guys I worked with, looked at me and went, you're just like that at work.
100%.
And I sort of said, oh no. And he said, you're always looking for how we can get better. And then I sort of realized a little bit that puts a lot on your staff team. So you've got to make sure that you're not putting too much in terms of perfectionism on them and all that sort of stuff. But still, I think it's a good thing to think about. But I think that in terms of, you know, what I saw a little bit in football, fantastic sport. The FA is great, some wonderful people there, great talented people. But in some areas that I saw, some of the places I worked in, because it's so big, they don't have to look outside. Do our own courses, we do our own this, we do our own that. And, you know, the better, obviously, top level, you know, they will be talking to other people, they will be looking at other sports. And I know Gareth Southgate does that. You know, he works with other top performance coaches, etc. However, in some areas, they don't look outside. And I think they really lose that. And you just get stuck in your bubble and you don't ever get any better because you just know what you know and what you were taught and what you've seen in the system. So I think it's really important to look outwards and to explore other things.
Wow, there's some great golden nuggets for any of our young coaches listening to this. And in fact, not just our young coaches, LG and I have been making notes throughout this whole thing. Ish, that definitely sums you up as a person and what I know of you. You're just always looking to improve and always looking to help and assist others. And yeah, phenomenal, which kind of leads us on to, I know this question, I know LJ and I are most probably fighting over asking this one, but at the moment, you're a consultant at the moment for World Rugby. And you set up the women's high performance coaching program, which is just phenomenal. And certainly I've learned so much as a coach that's been involved in the game a long time and is forever learning. And this has given me a different platform, different eyesight, to see so many females across the world, literally across the world, in every corner of the world, which is just phenomenal. Kind of, can you tell us a little bit about that program, how it was set up, what you've achieved so far? And I think we'll just bounce around some questions on that, just generally.
Yeah, sure. So 2018, I decided I needed a break from working. So I decided to leave the FA and take a little bit of a break and to look at moving back up north, and cashing in on my house sale down there to have a property up here. And before I even finished, Katie Sadlier, who's the general manager for women's rugby at World Rugby, said to me, "Oh, so you're leaving the FA, so I've got a project for you." And I said, no. I'm having a break. I'm going to Mexico for 6 weeks. I'm just chilling. And she went, "Oh, it's okay, it's women into high performance coaching." And I went, "Oh, damn you." So I couldn't not do it. I said, "Oh, okay, what is it?" She said, I'd like you to do some research and write a report on the situation, because I've done this audit and there's only at the Olympics and at the last World Cup, there's only one female head coach and only 3 other female coaches involved in either of those. So I really want to understand why and what we can do about it. So that was, for me, obviously I couldn't turn that project down. And so I did research and I put together the report that went to the Women's Advisory Committee. I went off to Mexico, still went, and it went to the Women's Advisory Committee. And within that, there were a number of, I guess there were some findings in terms of the research and the issues and the barriers that are across all sports, not just rugby. And also some recommendations. So having got back from my trip and moved north and everything, Katie asked me if I would implement the recommendations. So I'm now working with Katie and World Rugby team to really look at implementing those recommendations and looking at meeting the aspirations that we've got for the game.
I just want to jump in and say I'm really enjoying the process that we're going through. And also the other thing, like Bird said, you get to see women from all around the world. Like personally, I've been really lucky. I've worked with some fantastic female coaches, which have given me, confidence. People like Bird, Susie, Giselle, all of them have given me so much confidence and to go and, be a coach in my own right, as well as, developing players and stuff like that. So I think it's really, really exciting what you're doing, but there's definitely something out there in coaching at the moment where we need to help women feel confident. And, I've just gone through the process of having my own family, and that was quite challenging because at the same time I went on my level 4 and there were things that I had to go through in that moment in my life where I was desperate to be on that level 4 because I was like, this is my only opportunity whilst 6-month-old son, having to lock myself away while I'm breastfeeding. But do you know what? Like, actually, the women around me gave me the confidence. Just go do it. I think, it doesn't matter. I think this is the right time for you. So I'm loving what we're on right now. And I think we have to shout about the females in the game doing a great job at coaching to get more women to do it at all levels.
And I think that's right. So if I'm looking back at the barriers that we found, and there's no one thing you can point to and say, well, that's what it is. And that's the big learning is that the barriers are all interlinked, and we need to address all of them. The way we've probably done it in sport for the last 30 years has been to really look at women's confidence and competence. And we've sort of ignored the fact the issues are structural, cultural, and there's a bunch of unconscious, sometimes conscious biases that tell against women getting certain roles. So you have to address all of them together. And one of the things, when I was packing my house up, I found all my old coaching files from like the 1980s from the National Coaching Foundation. And a great friend and colleague of mine, Anita White, who's done masses in the area of women in sport. I think she's doctor then, now she's a professor. So she'd written an article, this was 1987, I found it, and it was about women in coaching, or the lack of. And every single thing 30 odd years later was the same. Yeah. And in fact, exacerbated by the fact that there are now paid roles within women's sport. If you think about Olympic sports, but particularly the female sports that are traditional male games, where those roles are paid. And because they're there and they're paid and they're an option now, the guys come in and get awarded those roles. And fair enough, they may be the right people, and it's a pathway now for them. However, it ignores some of the great strengths that women have, and we need to do something about the structures and systems and recruitment processes in order to make sure women are involved and get those roles. So a lot of the work I've been doing is around still about women's confidence and competence, so that you can put yourself forward, but also when you do put yourselves forward, the way things work give you an equal chance, either of getting a qualification or getting a job, and particularly getting a role at a high level and a high performance level. So a lot of the interventions that we're putting in place are trying to address all those things. So the program you're talking about is the Cascade program, the Women's Cascade program that we've done off the back of the Women's High Performance Academy, the Virtual High Performance Academy run by World Rugby, where we ran a part of it was a women's program. So from that, we've developed the Cascade that would then involve more women, but also being led by the Gold Group coaches who were on that Virtual Academy program last year, who are more than talented enough to facilitate the conversation. So it's allowed us to cascade, and that's why it's called the Cascade program, to cascade that information and the learning down to the next level of coaches for yourself, LJ, on the database that we've got, that we set up. I set up right from the start, but also we've opened that up to the regions. So we initially set up a database which was for the top, sort of what we'd say 14, 16 unions to nominate the top level female coaches that you would consider high performance. And some of those on the outskirts, especially around sevens, etc., weren't asked to put people forward. So now I'm working with the regions to make sure we're starting to capture those. Because I think the biggest thing coming out of it, and this is the same with the research, is you're not open to the same networks, informal networks that the guys have. And we've got to build the women's sort of social capital networks. And I think coming out of everything that anybody says is actually it's the biggest gain is being part of something. It's not just the technical, tactical knowledge again. It's actually being part of the network and now knowing that we're part of something, and also you can ring somebody else up and have a chat about it. Yeah. So I think that's where we're starting to really, 2 years on from when we start to get the growth and get the change and involve people and involve other organisations in the setup.
And what do you think needs to happen in different countries, different unions to support the programme for these females?
So one of the things I did, one of the key things for me is, you always start with having an idea of where you are in terms of an audit of how many women are coaching, how many are qualified, how many deployed, or where are they deployed. So we don't always have that information, but I think for me, what I wanted to do was work with World Rugby, work with the unions to start setting some targets because if you count it, then people value it. But what we've got to make sure is that we count the things we value, not value the things we can count. Does that make sense? So, just because you can count it doesn't make it the right target. So I really wanted to work on active coaches, not just around the qualification. Qualifications are an indicator, but we really want to know active coaches. So we're working on that at the minute with World Rugby to look at how we can do that and how we can make sure we capture those. So you start with the targets, but at the same time, what I didn't want to do was for us to try and implement and drive targets with unions and with regions without giving them the support, guidance. So I wrote a toolkit, the Women Coaching Rugby Toolkit, that was launched around this time last year, and it's based, even that was let's not reinvent the wheel. I got the permission from, it was an EU, the SCORE program from the EU, done through the Erasmus Foundation, that was written by UK Coaching. So I got permission to use theirs as the base, and I wrote the toolkit from that, and I rugbyfied it. So I put case studies in from rugby. I amended it to make it accessible and understandable for rugby, if you like. And within that, it talks about how you may want to do things differently to try and get women into coaching and what you might have to do. Quite honestly, you could do this with any workforce that you were targeting that was low participant. So you could do it for referees, you could do it for sort of administrators, etc. It's just thinking differently about how and what you do. And certainly within that, it's around how you get more women into coaching, how you ensure they go up the pathway themselves. So what's the pathway for them? And you don't need a separate pathway for women, but you need to make sure that every area of the coaching pathway is open for women and what's getting in the way. So really understanding that. And, recognizing that some of the issues that get in the way for women getting right to the top, or maybe not being able to attend a course, or the fact that they've got childcare responsibilities, they've got family responsibilities, there's other things that get in the way. There are, I guess at that top level as well, trying to shift the idea that, and often players will say this, and international players, well, he's got to be better than her because he coaches at Super Rugby or at a Premiership club, and she's only coaching women's game. So what does that say about the value that even players place on the game? So we've got to really look at what are the competencies you need as a coach, and you demonstrate them by being involved in this setup and this coaching, and also, what's expected of coaches as well. So there's a whole range of things that we've got to do, but a lot of that is addressed in the toolkit in terms of, looking at recruitment practice for unions as well. So within that, hopefully the unions are starting to look at it and think about, they don't have to do loads, but just have a plan. Where are you? Where do you want to be? And how are you going to get there? And here's the 2 or 3 key things we're doing. So for instance, on the back of the toolkit, and the work we've been doing, Martin Bassano, who's the sort of training education guy for South America, he set up a female coaches academy there. So he's sort of replicating what we're doing at international level. Rugby Africa are going to have their own internship program based on what we're doing with the World Cup. They're going to be doing that with some of the coaches, and part of their process is being involved in the Cascade program. So good practice can filter down, and you can amend it to make it what you need it to be. So I guess, and then it's the unions looking at what are they doing internally to really drive women's involvement and to ensure that women are profiled and women coaches are profiled, so that you can see it and you can be it.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Carol. Actually, the player, obviously myself and Bird working with the girls in the Prem, there's been a big drive around that whole role model. If I can see it, I can be it. I still think that's the same for the female coach as well, especially even like you say, to just change the perception of the athlete. There's so many athletes that we've worked with, hey Bird, that we were probably the first female they've ever been coached with. And hopefully it was a pleasant experience for them. But do you know what I mean? And that's a bit shocking, really, because even they're shocked to be coached by a woman.
Yeah, and we know that also that there's research that says that you're more likely to go into coaching as a woman if you've been coached by a woman.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting.
So there's that research there. The other thing is that the key 4 points I have, especially around the internship program, is okay, build competence. So competency of female coaches, that builds confidence in them to then push themselves forward. So sometimes you might need women on the courses, but not for too long, please. Because we miss too much if we're not working with the guys. They know loads, and you know, they can be our biggest advocates and supporters. So competence, confidence, and then visibility. So being able to be seen. So the internship program for me helps show that. So we'll have 12 female coaches at the next World Cup with those squads and working with them over the year, which will now be nearly 2 years. And then credibility. So for me, all those things, you build visibility and credibility because they then get seen by players and by other coaches and by other staff and by other people coaching within those setups. And then we start to just grow that whole thing whereby you're just seen, which is what we all want, to normalize having women coaches. So you're just a coach.
Yeah. Wow. It's just incredible. And, you know, you can tell just by the way you're speaking about it, your enthusiasm, you know, for it and how it's developing and building. And for me personally, like I said, it's just been an absolute pleasure. And the chat, you know, this morning I was on a group chat just before this, you know, involved with the Cascade session, you know, and the knowledge and passion amongst those female coaches to share what they know with other females is just brilliant. And like you say, you know, the guys as well, that, you know, there is so much we can learn from them as well. And it's, you know, it's important that we share that knowledge and they can learn from us as well. And, you know, it's just great, that interaction. And
so the main thing, sorry, I just say this one last thing really is for me, it's always about diversity. So whether that's gender, race, socioeconomic, whatever it is, thinking, you know, that's where strength comes from, because if we're all the same, we're coaching the same way in a team, it's not, it gets sort of not boring, but it doesn't lead anywhere. So you need some challenge, you need some creativity, you need to be different. So the whole drive for me in everything that we're doing is about diversity, diverse coaching teams, diverse boards, diverse practice, you know, thinking about how we do it differently. And that's that whole thing about collaboration and learning from how other people do it differently. And you pick it and you go, actually, I love that bit, or I'm going to do this a bit differently and see what happens for my players. So, you know, we want women coaching in men's squads. We want the diversity of coaching panels to really give our players the best experience they can have.
100%.
I'm just thinking, as you're talking, Carol, just thinking how you said about you need to have a clear vision. I can see your clear vision. I really like your toolkit idea, you know, where you said about competence, confidence, and then the visibility. Like, that's such a clear idea. And for me, sitting here now reflecting as a coach, like thinking of your journey, being competent and then confident, I'm probably now trying to be the visible part, because I actually think I'm on that journey. I can see myself in your vision. So yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. It's been, honestly, we've been chatting away here, and I could still carry on chatting for the rest of the day. It's been absolutely brilliant. And what, you know, like I say, it's just so exciting to see where this is going to go. And of course, I didn't even think about it, but you're right about those interns as well. They've got like an extra year now, haven't they, with the national squads, which is because sadly the Women's Cup, for the right reasons, got postponed to next year. Completely agree with that. You know, and that's amazing for those interns as well. What a fantastic, phenomenal opportunity. 12 female coaches. Wow, it's going to be amazing. But thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant, and thank you for everything you're doing and continue to do for women's rugby. It's just amazing, and you did deserve that holiday, that little break in Mexico. But I'm glad we got you back. I'm glad we've got you back in the game, because God, it's so exciting talking to you. But we normally finishing with a little quick fire round as well, so we're going to come on to that with Eld. But yeah,
I've tried to come up with...
Thank you for everything you guys do. Come on, Bird, you've been around as long as I have, and the amount of stuff you've done is quite phenomenal as well. So, you know, we should all give ourselves a pat on the back. So
typical Ish, look, deflecting it away from her.
We got youngsters like LJ now to take it forward when
Come on, LJ.
She's in her own six. Yeah.
A fantastic
I've
coach in the
got
making
some
there, Elge.
great people to learn from, so don't worry, I'm going to do my best, don't worry. I've tried to come up with some, post-COVID lockdown would you rather. Let's see where we go with it.
Yes,
so basically just shout out which one you would rather do. So to start with, would you rather have an Easter egg hunt or a hot cross bun and a tea?
Hunt.
Easter egg hunt.
I'm not a big chocolate fiend, but I think Easter egg hunt with my great nephews and nieces.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, I'm up for that, definitely. Bit of excitement. Get those eggs in the basket.
Okay, my next one is DIY or gardening. This is probably one that you'd rather not do because you've been doing a lot of it.
Honestly, everything on my balcony that my sister planted last year is dead, and I'm getting it coming around in the next few weeks to redo them. Yeah.
Well, mine, on the other hand, would be gardening. I do love a plant. I do like growing things. So I'm a gardener.
Nice.
There we are.
Debs Griffin bought me 2 indestructible plants, house plants, and they're still alive. They're still alive, honestly. She did a great job. Yeah.
Loving that.
My next one is a theatre trip or a cinema trip.
Oh, no, I like both, but probably theatre.
Yeah.
I do both loads. Yeah.
I enjoy both.
A beach holiday or a ski holiday?
Beach. Never did skiing because I was always playing rugby, and then by the time I was free to go and ski, my knee was stuffed.
Yeah. At the moment, I could do the beach holiday, so I'm going to go with Joinish and go on a beach holiday. Yeah.
Okay. And would you rather have a sit in a coffee shop, catch up with your mates, or a beer garden, catch up with your mates?
Beer
garden. Yeah.
That's the one thing I want to do. Apart from the Easter egg hunt with the great nephews and nieces, it's sit in a pub with some mates with a beer.
Yeah.
100% with this on that. Yeah. Get the beers in. Oh, well, thanks a million, guys. And we'll try and get that women's, the toolkit up. And if anybody, our listeners out there haven't seen it, go onto World Rugby, have a look at that women's rugby toolkit, and we'll make sure we get the link to that up as well. Well, Ish, like I say, thanks a million for all your time this morning. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And this is it, guys, for today. And if you want to hear more, please visit rugbycoachweekly.net and click on the podcast button to visit the women's section. Have a great and safe Easter, everybody. I do hope you all get out there and find those eggs and enjoy eating them. And hopefully we'll be in that beer garden soon, eh? Because lockdown's on its way out. Hurrah!
Absolutely. Thank you both.
Enjoy yourselves, guys, and we'll speak to you all again soon. Thanks a million, Ish.